around the time I started playing guitar, when I was about 13 years old, is when I first got introduced to both U2 and Pink Floyd. Both bands have since become two of my favorite acts of all time, and they both feature two of my favorite guitar players, The Edge and David Gilmour. They're both known for being sonic architects and building these massive, what I call landscape guitar sounds. So what we're going to do today is talk about some of the fundamental techniques to building some massive lead guitar sounds. There's some things that you want to know how to do, as well as things that you want to avoid to keep you from sounding muddy or getting lost in the mix. So all of these techniques will work both live and in a studio setting. So if you're playing in church on Sunday mornings, or if you have a band and you want to start experimenting with new sounds, or you're writing and producing your own music and you want your leads to stand out in the mix a little better, these tips are going to help you out. So we're going to be working with 4 effects today: drive, modulation, delay, and reverb. Now this is all about balance and combining these effects in a way so that one is not overpowering another. You don't want too much overdrive, too much saturation, just like you don't want too much reverb or too much chorus or an octave effect. It's a lot like cooking. You want a nice even balance of your ingredients so that your final result fits in the context of the final mix, whether that be a band in a live setting or a recorded song. So we're going to be working inside the Kemper today 100%, but all of this is applicable to your normal rig. If you don't have a Kemper, if you have a standard pedal board and amp setup, all these fundamentals work pretty much exactly the same way. So let's talk about these effects individually, how they work with each other, and then we'll break down some of the sounds in the actual track, and I'll show you how to replicate them in your rig. Okay, first up is overdrive. One mistake I see a lot of players make when they're dialing in these big ambient lead tones is they're using too much overdrive. But one thing I started to notice, especially when listening to stuff from U2 or Coldplay, those guitar sounds don't have a ton of gain on them, and I think that actually helps them to cut through the mix. So the isolated guitar part you just heard is a good example of this. Now this is one of my Kemper profiles of a Matchless Lightning 15 that I use to create this sound. All of these profiles are available for download. You can check them out in the link below. And here's what this profile sounds like. Now this is a really important point I want to make here. A lot of times these guitar sounds need to be a little bit brighter than you're comfortable with playing on your own. And the reason for that is where the guitar sits in the frequency spectrum. We are a mid-range instrument, which means we sit in the same part of the frequency space as the human voice, as keyboards, and when there's a big point in a song like this, where you've got a driving crash cymbal, 2 other double-tracked rhythm guitars, a driving bass line, there's a lot happening frequency-wise. So when you're putting together a sound like this for a high rhythm part or a lead part, you want some brightness, you want some top end to help you cut through all of that mid-range. All right, next up is modulation. Now, modulation is a pretty big tent. It encompasses everything from chorus and flangers and vibes, tremolos. There's a lot of different effects that we can put in the modulation camp. But for today, we're mainly going to be focusing on pitch modulation and specifically chorus. Now, as you can probably tell by the track, I'm a big fan of chorus, especially with Strats. I like them on the 2 and 4 position with some nice 80s style chorus to give you that retro sound. Here's the part I played to open the track. So that's a pretty simple sound, nothing too crazy. The thing I want to talk about though with chorus is how it adds weight and width to your guitar sound. I talked about this a little bit in my delay video, how adding some pitch modulation or chorus sound to your delay repeats can add a lot of weight to your guitar sound. And the same thing is happening here, even though we don't have a delay on. This is basically just a light room reverb and some chorus. To demonstrate, I'll turn the chorus off and play the same part. That sounds nice, but having the chorus on, To me, that just adds a really great extra element. That's pretty simple. How does this pertain to a lead sound? Well, anytime you add delay and overdrive, having that pitch moving back and forth is really going to make the guitar step forward in the mix. Now, when you're listening to a track, your ear doesn't necessarily pick out the fact that the guitar is kind of going in and out of tune. That's what chorus is doing, is modulating the pitch. But what it does here is that slight rub, that dissonance that's happening somewhere in the mix, and it helps that guitar part step out. On the same patch here, I've got some delay and a little boost, and I use that for this part. So now let's turn the chorus off and see what it sounds like. Again, same thing as the intro part. It sounds nice, but that doesn't necessarily have the same character and the same vibe, as well as not stepping forward in the mix as much because we don't have that very slight pitch modulation going on from our chorus. Finally, reverb and delay. Now, I've done videos about these effects in the past, both individually and on combining them. You can find those linked in the description. And I'll reiterate some points that I made in those videos here, because I think it's really important that people understand this when it comes to combining all of these effects together. The key with using reverb and delay to build these big anthemic lead sounds is knowing when too much is too much and not enough is not enough. So, right here I have a patch pulled up that is essentially the same patch I used for the lead -1 effect, which we'll get to in a moment. And I've got some reverb and delay dialed in together, and it sounds like this. Now, you might notice that both of those effects sound relatively subtle, right? Most of what's happening is the overdrive is sticking through, and then the delay and reverb are kind of sitting underneath. That's what I'm trying to do here. It's the same kind of idea as overdrive. Too much gets muddy really quick and will bury your guitar in the mix. And so to show you that, let me crank the delay and reverb on the Kemper here. I'll just bring the mix up. And now listen. You can hear that the transients of the notes and the rhythms that I'm playing are kind of getting lost under all that big washy reverb and delay sound. Another important point that I want to make here is using these effects to inform what parts you're playing and how you're playing those parts. So with a big sort of anthemic lead sound like I used in this track, there's a lot going on. There's reverb, delay, a little bit of chorusing, and an octaver effect, which I'll talk about in a second. And with all that stuff going on, I don't really want to start playing something that's really fast or a lot of notes or a lot of syncopation, because it's just going to get lost in the delay repeats and in the reverb. All right, so now I'm going to take you through and show you how I put together this final sound for the lead part at the end of the track. Pretty simple, but it's combining all four of the effects that we talked about in the video plus an octaver. So essentially what I was trying to do here was add a nice big anthemic lead sound that was going to cut right through the mix, and I think I was able to pull that off. So here's what it sounds like on its own. Now, first and foremost, you're going to notice that octave effect sticking out front and center, but you probably didn't notice it in the track. And that's sort of the secret trick behind this tone, is using that octave effect to help bring your guitar forward. It's not necessarily going to be heard in the context of a full band or full track, but it does help. So let's take a look at the octave effect here on the Kemper. Basically, I've got two voices. On the first voice, we have one octave up. On the second voice, we have one octave down. And I've got the mix at about -7. And then other than that, I've got a boost here. This is just the pure booster. It's adding just a simple volume boost. Now, the profile I'm using for this sound is another one of mine. It's my FTR 37, set to a pretty gainy sound. So here is the profile by itself. And that's about as much overdrive or saturation I would want to get out of a lead sound like this. Any more and you're really going to start to get muddy and lost in the mix. But I am adding a little bit of a boost on the front end here just to give it some extra brightness and kick. And so that's the basic sound. And then the delay and reverb are pretty simple. I've just got a simple 8th note delay going on. And other than that, just adding a little bit of reverb. So again, the secret to this sound is really that octave effect. And you can do that on your own rig in a bunch of different ways. Pedals like the Pog from Electro Harmonics or the Pog 2 or Micro Pog are great options for this. Basically, anything that gives you the ability to add an octave up effect is really going to help you out with this kind of sound. So there you go. Those are my tips for building a massive lead guitar sound. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know by leaving a like and comment down below. Be sure to subscribe to the new Rhett Shull live channel linked down below. It's where I'm doing all my live streams from now on, starting with these sessions every Monday night. I produce the tracks in real time on live stream so you can be a part of the production process. Also, if you're interested in picking up any of the Kemper profiles I used in this video, those will be linked down below as well. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of Signal Flow. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next Wednesday, I'm Rhett Shull. Remember, there is no plan B.